Owners and operators, welcome back to another episode of the Owner Operator Podcast. I'm your host, Austin Gray. And in this episode, I have Baird Kleinsmith joining us. Baird is an owner and investor in self-storage properties in Colorado and New Mexico. In 2021, Baird bought his first self-storage facility. And in 3 short years, he has grown this business to $2.6 million in top line revenue. And it's kicking off almost $900K in cash, which is really impressive because the business is being operated and managed by a team in Latin America, completely offshore. So what we're going to get into in this episode is how he bought his first self-storage deal. And also the second half of the episode, we're going to talk specifically about how you can leverage offshore talent in Latin America to help grow your operations. Look, Baird thinks that every business here in the US could benefit from talent offshore. And he's placed a bet on it, so much so that he has co-founded a business called Hire Latam. And I've gone through their sales process. I actually just went in last week, and it is very impressive. For all of you out there who think you can only hire people in the US, it's such a myth. There are plenty of smart, talented people all around the world. And guess what? When you hire someone offshore, you are giving them an opportunity that they would not have otherwise. You are creating something here in the US that can have such an impact on people. Doing something really cool for people in Venezuela right now. He is actually, at the time of this episode, waiving the onboarding fee for placing talent from Venezuela with US businesses. As I said, I'm actively going through this process right now. I will give you guys an update, but so far it has been incredible. And I'm excited for you guys to listen to this full episode because Baird gives some advice for any US business owner. As you guys know, I love local service, and I'm a true believer in the fact that we as local service business owners, especially if you're starting as an owner operator, can benefit from somebody just to help you with the back office. Back office was the first hire I ever made. So I'm excited for you guys to listen to this episode. I hope you enjoy it. Without further ado, let's jump into the episode. All right. Well, Baird, welcome to the show.
Thanks, man. Glad to be here.
I've been following you for a couple of years now. You've got a really interesting story. Looks like you, like a lot of other people who listen to this, get inspiration from podcasts. I read one of your tweets where you were on a mountain bike ride. You were listening to My First Million, came across some of Nick Huber's content. You stopped everything and went and sent out the letters. At that time, you were leading biz dev teams, correct?
Yeah. Yep. So I was in financial technology for, in the end, it ended up being about 15 years. And, but from a very early point, I realized that I didn't want to work for other people. Like I realized that I had a great skill set in selling and helping other people learn how to sell. And that was great for me, and that it allowed me to sort of build this career. But I was always looking to the next step. And actually, the first podcast that kind of set me on this track was Invest Like the Best. One of my friends, I was living in London, and one of my friends turned me onto this podcast that was an interview of a couple of Harvard Business School professors that described this the search fund strategy, this idea of buying a small business and adding value, and basically like buying yourself a leadership position, like an ownership position in a business, to get away from working from other people. And like the math made sense. It totally made sense that you buy this existing business with cash flows to support debt payments. And that kind of set me down this track of thinking about what my next step was. I was sort of planning what I was going to do when I got back to the States. I knew I didn't want to continue in the corporate career, and so I got thinking about buying a business, but I never really found anything that was inspiring to me until I heard Nick Huber on the My First Million podcast in, I think it was November of 2020, and that's when it clicked. It was like, okay, this is a business that doesn't sound too operationally complex. It certainly requires capital, and I had capital to deploy coming out of that career, and I didn't really think about it. And I just went for it. I started sending letters and was really lucky to get some responses. And um, I got to meet Nick in person a couple of weeks ago, and man, that guy changed my life. He his willingness to share is really sort of what set me up on this trajectory. And now I've said it before, like I feel like I'm living the life of my dreams. So say what you will about Nick's strategy of building an audience, but he, his generosity in sharing the details of his journey inspired me, and I know at least a handful of others that have gone down similar paths due to him sort of sharing his experience.
And it really has changed your life. I read one of your tweets the other day with an update. What are you, 3 years in at this point? You started in 2021. It's 2024 right now. It said 2.2 top line revenue.
Yeah.
1.6 in net operating income. And you're kicking off just shy of 9K cash, right?
Yeah. I mean, this year, it's hard for me to keep track of the numbers, but I mean, this last month we just closed the books on July, and across the portfolio, those 9 properties did about 252,000 in revenue. So we'll hit, if we just level off at this point, which I think there's quite a bit of room for growth in some of my properties. Like if we just level off at this point, we'll hit 3 million in top line revenue at about 75% net income margins. So I don't do public math, but if you subtract my debt service, it'll, I have the potential to cash flow 7 figures this year. So I'd never in my wildest dreams thought that I could, generate this kind of income with the sort of freedom that I've got now. So again, it's like I pinch myself often, think, man, I'm so lucky to have found this.
So take us back to the first deal. What did that look like? Well, I read one of your tweets, and it says that one of the guys responded to one of those 50 letters you sent.
Yep. Yeah.
But tactically, what did that look like? How much cash did you bring to the table? How much debt did you use? Take us just like the whole picture of the deal.
This is going to challenge me to think back to 3 years and a few months ago. But yeah, so rewind. I listened to Nick on the podcast, and I just thought, okay, well, I see all these crappy self-storage properties around me in Southwest Colorado, Northwest New Mexico, and so I could have like gone down this path of like buying a list or paying somebody else to build a list, but I just thought, you know what, I like the quickest way for me to do this is get on Google self-storage properties in these small towns around me, and build a list. So I like literally just manually, I'd go to Durango, to Cortez, to Bayfield, Pagosa Springs, all these little towns around me, and I'd Google self-storage, and I just built this Google spreadsheet of property name, the address, the phone number, any details that I could get around size, and then manually, again, no automation, and then manually went to the county assessor databases and did property searches to identify the owner of the company, where they get their mail, where they get their tax notices. And I just built this database of owners of self-storage properties. And this was really compressed. Like this was within like a matter of like a day or two. And then I created a form letter. I didn't even use the tools that I know are available to me now to create those letters. Like I created a template for this letter, and then manually filled in like the property name and the owner's name and all that detail. And if like there was something special I noticed about the property, I added that. And I printed those letters, hand signed each of them, folded them, put them in envelopes, hand addressed each of those envelopes. And I think that first mailing was about 50 letters that I sent out. And within a week, I got my first response. And actually, I remember the first property I bought, I had to do quite a bit of like investigative work to figure out who the owner of this property was, because it was the man who owned it lived in Seattle, Washington, The property was in Northwest New Mexico. It was owned by an LLC that was like a Washington State LLC. And so I like did a bunch of research, tracked him down. And I remember thinking in that process, like, man, you're wasting a ton of time. Like, you got 50 other properties to go after. Like, why are you wasting your time trying to track this one guy down? But luckily I persisted and tracked this guy down, and he called me right back. And he had only owned the property for a couple of years. He bought it in 2018, but he wanted to buy some property in Washington, and had started thinking about selling this property in New Mexico. And it was perfect. Like, it was perfect timing. I think he was going to put it on the market in the spring. I reached out to him in like November or December of 2020. And man, at that point, I had no idea what I was doing. Like, I had learned a bit from the internet about like what questions to ask, get the rent roll, get the profit and loss statement, try to figure out like what could you drive in terms of revenue, what kind of costs would I incur in operating the property. So I got that, and he had kind of focused in on like a 7.5% cap rate. And so based on his net income, that valued the property at 1.1 million. We ran the numbers and thought, okay, well, I think I can adjust prices. I think I can increase prices. His prices were really low compared to competitors in the area. And I did my best to create a pro forma P&L, and it looked good to me. Like, from what I could tell, it looked good, but I didn't really know. I knew that I didn't know what I was doing. So Nick Huber was offering consulting at the time. So I reached out to him. I was on a really tight time frame. And I remember I got on the phone with him at like 5 a.m. my time, 7 a.m. his time, because it was like the only time that he had available in his schedule for the next couple of weeks. So I was like, man, if you're available at 5, I'll get on the phone with you at 5. We did the deal together, and he confirmed what I was thinking, gave me some additional guidance, but basically like gave the thumbs up for the deal. And so in terms of like the specifics of that deal, is a $1.1 million purchase price at a 7.5% cap rate. So take 7.5% times 1.1. And so he must have been generating about 75, 80,000 in net income. And then for debt, I had started talking to a couple of local banks, got an idea of the interest rate, the loan term, that kind of thing, so I could sort of put that into my model, and the numbers seemed to work. And so I ended up on that deal. I did a conventional bank loan. I brought 20% down, so it was 275,000, somewhere about there, that I brought down, plus a little bit of like closing costs and legal fees, that kind of thing. And ended up buying that property. We'll go into the operations later. I had some major hiccups with that one. A lot of learning occurred in the first few months of that. But fast forward in time, and I ended up refinancing that property. I mean, it was just like a year. I must have refinanced it in like 2022, I think late 2022, after owning the property for maybe 18 months. Refinanced it, pulled like 350,000 cash out of it, refinanced into like a 10-year term on the interest rate, 20-year amortization. And I ended up selling that property in December of last year, so that I could buy my most recent buy. So I basically I bought this property for 1.1 million in February of 2021, sold it for 2 million in December of 2023, ended up getting, I think it was about 900,000 in net proceeds out of it. And then rolled that via 1031 exchange into a $12 million buy. So it was kind of like the perfect play of like buying something, adding value, stabilizing it, and then rolling the proceeds from it into what I now consider sort of like the gemstone in the Sultan's crown.
That is awesome. What were the terms on that first loan?
Yeah. So, oh man, interest rates were amazing back then. My original loan was 4%, 20-year amortization, and a 7-year adjust. And from the beginning, I've always been worried about interest rate risk. And so I've tried to get the longest fixed terms on the interest rate possible. And so I was it was 7 years until it would adjust 4%. I think my monthly payment was like somewhere around $5,000. And honestly, like that was a great loan. The only reason that I refinanced it was one, to get my cash out of it. And then two, I was buying another property at the time, and another local bank came to me with an amazing proposal to finance this new purchase, but they required that I bring a couple of properties that I had debt with other banks over. And so I refinanced this one plus another with this new bank in order to get like a really great loan on this new property that I was buying.
So this was what point last year, and where were interest rates?
When I refinanced, so this would have been, I think this was actually late 2022 when I did that refi, and I was able to refi at the same interest rate, so 4%, and a 10-year term on the interest rate. Again, still 20-year amortization. So I did that like right before interest rates started to go up. And I have some regrets about selling that property, in that like I had another 9 years left at 4%. It's really hard to pay off, $1 million of percent debt, but it was just the only way that I could buy this property that I knew had a whole lot more upside. If I had unlimited capital, I would have kept that property and bought this new one, but I don't. Cash is finite, and so I had to find it somewhere, and it was in selling this one.
Okay, so I want to hear about this opportunity, my property, because obviously it sounds like you found a gem there. But outside of that, we can bring this question into two. So whenever you bought that first property, you mentioned operationally there were some hiccups. So can you walk us through what those hiccups were operationally, and then what you learned from those hiccups, and then how it gave you the confidence to end this $12 million deal? And like maybe there were some of the same hiccups, or maybe some of the problems were the same, and maybe they weren't. But what were some of those first ones?
Yeah, so the first property I bought came with an on-site manager. But she was a remote on-site manager. She was local to the property and had been working in the office there. But with the pandemic, she had transitioned to working from home and going to the property as needed. She was not great, like not super friendly. What you would find with most self-storage managers. Like she wasn't super friendly. She didn't have a lot of focus on customer service. She sort of seemed bothered to do what I was asking her to do, and like be super friendly, be very outgoing, and very proactive with customer service. Like it seemed like an inconvenience to her. So I figured out pretty quickly that it wasn't going to work. Like she didn't really fit with my vision for creating this like really friendly, great customer service organization. But I kind of needed her there to help me learn how to run the property. In retrospect, I would have made a move much quicker, but it took me a couple of months to realize she wasn't going to work out. I explained to her that I was going to change direction, was hoping that she would stay on board for like a month and help me transition to somebody else managing the property remotely. But when I explained my intentions, she basically threw the keys at me and walked away. And so I was left there with a property that's like an hour drive away from me, with no manager, nobody to do anything. And so I immediately became the manager of this self-storage property. I was the guy answering the phones. I was troubleshooting gate problems from an hour away. I mean, I remember there was a couple of weeks where every day I was driving to the property to try to figure out gate issues. And, but it was trial by fire. I was forced to learn, the software, the processes, a lot of it. I probably had the benefit of like not knowing how things would normally work in a self-storage operation. And so I was able to sort of like design that from my own perspective of like, if I were a customer renting a unit of self-storage property, what would my experience be? And so I learned a ton there. And then eventually hired my sister-in-law to take over managing that property, plus a few others that I had accumulated in the following months. And she was great, but ultimately, like, it wasn't a fit for her, and she had the potential to do much more. And frankly, like, she was very expensive compared to what I heard I could get if I went offshore, international. And so fast forward today, I've built this amazing remote operations and customer service team that's all based in Latin America. I've got two folks in Venezuela. I've got one in Peru, and then one in Honduras that manage operations and customer service across 9 self-storage properties in Colorado and New Mexico now. And I mean, this business is not passive for me by any means. I'm still very actively involved in it, but I've got an amazing operations manager in Venezuela that's really the boss of this business. Like, she acts as sort of the CEO of the business, and really only involves me in critical decisions.
This is incredible. So can you expand more on how you went about making that first offshore
Yeah.
hire?
Yeah, and then this sort of evolves into the second business, Hire Latam. So rewind, I had my sister-in-law managing the properties. I knew I needed to augment her with some customer service staff. Originally tried hiring in the Philippines. Worked with one of the recruiters that I met on Twitter. They gave me some great candidates. I ended up hiring one. I was really impressed with the level of quality that I could find in the Philippines. But then when it actually came time for that person to work, they were clearly challenged by the time zone difference. They were being asked to stay up overnight. They were sleepy on recorded calls that I listened to. They'd disappear for hours at a time, probably to take a nap. I don't blame them. And it didn't work out. Replaced them with another person from the Philippines, had the same issues. And so I thought, okay, I like this model of finding somebody offshore to help with customer service, but maybe I can find somebody in these time zones. And so that led me to Latin America. I wasn't aware of any recruiters that were focused on Latin America, like the recruiter that I had found that was focused on the Philippines. So I had to go find people directly. So I found a job board that was focused on matching US businesses with remote talent in Latin America. I posted a job directly and fielded like hundreds of applications. And the vast majority of those applications were very unqualified. It took a ton of work to sort of filter through the good from the bad, but I was lucky and found my first hire. Her name's Andrea, and she's in Venezuela. So she joined as a customer service rep, and she's still with me today as sort of a senior customer service rep on the team. And then sort of built it out from there. After hiring her and her success, I thought, well, why don't I find a manager, a leader that could build this team from Latin America. So using that same job board, I found Desiree, who's my operations manager, also in Venezuela. I wasn't trying to find people specifically in Venezuela, but that's just where I happened to find my first two folks. And so I hired Desiree as operations manager. I knew immediately when I saw her video that she submitted to me with her application. I just knew immediately, like, she was the person to hire. And again, she's still with me today. She's the operations manager of the storage business. The customer service team all reports into her. She does it all. So from there, I woke up to this opportunity of hiring in Latin America. I'd found these, I'd gotten lucky and found these two great people, and I just thought, man, I want to get in this game. I see there are so many talented folks in Latin America. At the time, there wasn't any clear leader in the recruiting industry. So actually, I initially approached the owners of the job board that I had used to see if they'd be willing to sell. They weren't. They shut me down and were very clear that they had no interest in selling. But in that process of researching that company, I just happened to find a Twitter conversation between that company and Ed Rodriguez, who's now my partner in Hire Latam. I reached out to Ed on LinkedIn. I found him on Twitter, but I reached out to him on LinkedIn, and we chatted and decided it was a great fit for us to partner. I could bring some of my expertise in growing a business. He knew the recruiting industry really well, and so we joined forces and started Hire Latam in April of last year, April of 2023. And now, like, that team has grown tremendously. We've got like 25 people across at least a dozen countries in Latin America. The majority of that team are recruiters across many different countries in Latin America, and we're now placing dozens of remote workers in Latin America with great jobs with U.S., Canadian, and even some European businesses.
And as someone who has gone through your onboarding process so far, I mean, this is incredible. It's like what we need as small business owners. Your fee structure seems very straightforward and fair. For anybody listening to this, a lot of our listeners are in the early stages of starting a local service business. And so for all of you people listening, this is something I'm actively going through the process of right now. And I have to fill out my job description right now. I've already gone through, the first call with the team. Super professional. It's awesome, the talent that is available just with a Zoom or a Meet. So I want to talk about, how would you coach me to set this hire up well? I've never done this before. I've never hired offshore. A lot of our listeners likely haven't either. How would you coach us to go and set the expectations well on that first hire? Because in my mind, there's like a million different things this person could help me out with.
Yep. So you could go one of two paths. The first path would be you hire somebody who's more experienced, more skilled, and you ask them to build your processes, your SOPs. Like, you get somebody who has some autonomy that can help you sort of build your figure out how to structure this, this team or this operation. The second would be, if you've already got those processes very well defined, you hire somebody maybe who's a little bit more junior that can just fit into the processes that you have, while also looking for somebody that's proactive, intelligent, driven, that is not just going to take direction, but is also going to, help you build and look for areas of opportunity. So I think that's the first decision you have to make, is like, do you want somebody who's going to, who's really going to help you build and define, or are you going to have somebody, or are you going to hire somebody who's just going to plug into, the operation that you already have today? And so, yeah, which one do you think you sort of fit into?
I would love to hire someone who can help me build the process. And the reason being is because I've started multiple businesses. And, one thing I've been challenging myself right now is like, don't go start another business, because that's the easy thing to do. It's so easy right now. And you see opportunities everywhere. It's like, I could literally start any sort of service business and go do the basic blocking and tackling and get it to somewhere between 500 and $1 million of revenue. Like, that's the easy thing to do. But what I'm challenging myself to do right now is like, okay, once you generate 7 figures, how do you beat the next boss? Mm-hmm. And where I personally have growth to do is build out the process. Like I think my MO is sort of just like hustle, do as much as you possibly can, like run around like a chicken with your head cut off and just get the stuff done. But you can only do that for so long, and you're literally just running yourself ragged, and you're going to cap the company, right? The company's never going to grow beyond the leader, if that's who the leader is. So I'm personally really challenging myself right now. Like, let's hire someone who has experience building the processes and the team.
Yeah. So I think, one thing that might be helpful for you and others is to think about your ideal future state. what's the work that you want to be doing, and what's the work that you're best at doing, and then I would hire for the future. Like when I hired Desiree as my ops manager, I think at the time I only had like 4 properties, but I knew that I wanted to get to the point that I had many more properties, a much bigger portfolio. So I hired somebody that I thought could not only grow with the business, but could help like drive that business growth. I'm responsible for acquisitions. Like I go and I find the properties to buy, but I knew I needed somebody that was capable of like scaling an operation. And so I almost like overhired from the beginning, and brought somebody in who was probably like overly qualified for the job at the time, but I knew that the job would grow over time, as I sort of transitioned away from like the lower value activities that I was spending the majority of my time on. And that allowed me to focus in on like the higher value activities that I sort of specifically have the skill set for. Like I know I'm really good at sales. Like I'm really good at convincing the owner of a storage property to sell their business to me. And then I know I'm also very good at like optimizing revenue and costs and that kind of thing. And so I looked for somebody that could sort of take everything else off of my plate that was sort of lower value, so I could focus on the higher value stuff.
Can you talk us through like what the difference in investment would be for a business owner here based on those 2 different routes? So if I were to go hire someone more junior who would essentially just be helping me with low leverage tasks, and I'm taking on the responsibility of defining those processes and figuring out how to scale the operations, versus hiring someone who has that specific expertise and they are going to go lead that function of the business.
Yeah, I think either way, you should expect to invest a good deal of your time up front. I would say the difference between the 2 routes is that if you hire a more junior person, you can expect to be their manager, right? You can expect to be their frontline manager, doing daily management activities with them. So it'll be like an ongoing sort of management job that you've created for yourself. Versus if you scale up and you get somebody who's a little bit more skilled, more experienced, more capable, it's probably an equal amount of time that you're going to have to invest up front. But then longer term, you're not going to have to be as involved in the day-to-day operations. Like you can trust that you take them on, or I'm sorry, that they take those daily operations tasks on. So I think it's just a difference of like, an upfront investment versus an ongoing investment in those 2 different types of levels that you could hire. The other thing too that I would encourage is I've seen a lot of folks have focused in on, like a lot of clients of Hire Latam have focused in on finding people that have like very specific experience in the industry that they're in. Like I know an example of like another self-storage operator who really wanted to hire somebody that had real estate property management experience. And we found a bunch of really great candidates who had, had like were really intelligent, had, proven success in other industries, but didn't have that like property management specific experience. And we thought they should have hired somebody without property management experience, but demonstrated success in other sort of adjacent industries that would transfer really well to the real estate industry. That client ended up choosing a candidate that like we didn't really recommend, but had property management experience, and that candidate didn't work out. We have a guarantee where if somebody doesn't work out within 90 days, we replace them for free or we refund. That candidate didn't work out. The operator came back to us and said, okay, I'm going to follow your direction this time. And they ended up hiring somebody who didn't have property management experience, but was really bright, really driven. And that person's worked out tremendously well for them. So, long story short, I would say focus less on like specific industry experience and more on, on the person and their like demonstrated success in doing the kinds of things that you would expect them to do, even if it's not in your specific industry.
That makes sense. Specifically, what is the cost difference?
Like a couple hundred, it's amazing what a couple $100 a month will do in increasing the level of talent that you can get. So like I'd say a junior customer service rep who's really just going to take phone calls, handle, customer scheduling and payments and all of that. Like you could get somebody who's less experienced but really good for maybe $1,200 a month. But if you increase that budget to like $1,500, $1,700 a month, you can get like a manager level person, somebody who's gonna not just answer the phones, but is gonna be proactive and actually like building and managing an operation, even if that operation is small and maybe it's just them, but taking on more of the things that you do. So it's incredible, like the difference of $200 to $500 a month can really improve the level of quality of candidates that you can find. And so we're typically every client we work with, we have sort of a consultative call and we go through all of this. And I'd say more often than not, we end up coming out of that call with a higher level role than maybe the client initially thought they wanted to hire. Because I mean, you think about it, like it's really easy to get an additional $500 a month in value from somebody who's really good versus somebody who's like, solid, but kind of good.
Yeah, definitely. And one of the videos you posted last night, it's incredible. I'm sure you have people lining up who want to hire that person.
Yeah. For the context for listeners is that Venezuela is tough right now. A couple of years ago, I had no awareness or interest in international politics, but I have two people on my storage team that are in Venezuela, and they've given me pretty heartbreaking insights into what's gone on. I mean, long story short, they have a communist or socialist dictator, and they had elections on Sunday. By all accounts, the opposition, like the Democratic opposition candidate, won like 70% of the vote. But this socialist dictator Maduro rigged the election and claimed himself the victor. And it's an incredibly oppressive regime. There's a huge disparity of wealth in Venezuela. Like there are the haves and the have-nots. There's this elite group of rich, and then everybody else is in poverty. And so my team is sharing with me like these just heartbreaking stories of what's going on in Venezuela. And I thought, well, what can we do to help? Like, what can I personally do to help Venezuela? And I proposed this idea to Ed, my co-founder in Hire Latam, of like, hey, let's just get as many Venezuelans good jobs as we can, because the more power to the Venezuelan citizens in the form of great jobs and great income, the more likely they are to make change in their local political environment. And so we've, with Hire Latam, we're constantly filling jobs, and we try to present at least 3 qualified candidates for each job. So it ends up with that for every job that we fill, we have at least 2 candidates that we've taken through this vetting process that are really well qualified for the job, like people that we think could do these jobs, but they just didn't end up getting hired because somebody else was better. And so I thought, well, we've already done all this legwork to qualify these candidates. We've already sunk our costs. Yeah, we may make revenue if we place those candidates in roles in the future, but that's never assured. And like, let's just do what we can to get these people jobs. And so we decided, let's completely remove the barrier to businesses hiring these folks, and let's waive our placement fee for any of these pre-vetted workers that are in Venezuela that we can place in jobs. And so yeah, yesterday I tweeted that we're going to completely waive our placement fee, which is normally $2,900 for the first hire. We're going to waive that placement fee for anybody that we've got in our pre-vetted candidate database in Venezuela. And even if a competitive recruiter came to us and was like, "Hey, I have this job. It's been really hard for us to fill. Do you have any candidates in Venezuela?" I would happily pass those candidates to a competitor, and they can charge their client for that placement. I don't care. All I care is that we do our best to find these people great jobs, giving them strength to to make changes in their local community. And I'd say Hire Latam, our mission with Hire Latam is a little bit backwards. In that it's candidate focused. Like our mission with Hire Latam is to find as many Latin Americans great jobs as we can. Now we've got to create a business that supports that. And so we have to, we charge clients a fair rate to do that. But really our mission is on the candidate side, and matching them with great jobs. And we feel like if we do that job well, the money will follow. And that business it's been profitable from the start, even without like a primary focus on revenue and profit.
So this is an opportunity for any of our listeners right now. If you're in the early stages of growing a business, I can tell you firsthand, the best decision I ever made, and it was one of our mutual friends, Berg. I was talking to him early on. As you may or may not know, I think his first business was it was like a sewer and water business, excavation in Denver. And so he was around about the time we met, I was starting this business, and he was kind of saying all the things I've gone through. And so he was able to just like give me some advice pretty early on that really fast tracked us. And I think it comes back to this concept, hire before you actually think that you need it. So he pushed me early on. He's like, "Look, man, like you cannot be doing everything. You have to hire someone to just help you with the administrative tasks." And so by making the decision and really like making that investment up front, it paid dividends over the next 18, 20 months. She has since moved on, but it's because we kind of got to this point of like, we live in an expensive mountain town. Like you're overqualified. She helped us greatly. She did her job very well, but like well, I'll keep her information private, like where she worked in the past, but she was overqualified for the role. Right? And so it just kind of ended up in this situation where it's like, look, this business, like we just can't pay you a 6-figure salary to the admin side of things, right? And so that's where I see this being such a great opportunity for small local service business owners like myself and a lot of our listeners. So where can they find this business?
So hirelatam.com. And we've got there's a couple of buttons on the website for hire in Latin America, or have us hire. And that just goes to a basic type form where interested parties can submit their information in it. And then at the end of the form, there's a Calendly link to book a call with our sales team. We've got a couple of sales folks. Everybody in this business is based in Latin America, with the exception of my partner, Ed, and I. Ed is originally from Puerto Rico, but lives in St. Louis. I'm, of course, in Colorado, but every single one of the other folks that are in this business are in Latin America. And so you described that, you've gone through this process. You've had a sales call. Did you have a call with Anna?
Yes, I did.
Yeah, so Anna's in Panama, and she's a perfect demonstration for the kind of people that we can hire. That's one of the things I love about this service is that like the proof of our product is actually like in our sales process. So you get on the phone call with a salesperson in Latin America who's super well spoken, understands our business really well, understands the remote talent environment in Latin America really well, and they're like a perfect example for you of like the kinds of people that we can find. And so yeah, if any of your listeners want to go to the website, submit your information, schedule a call with the sales team, which will be Anna or a couple of other folks. and it's no pressure. Like we're happy to take those phone calls, just even as an exploratory step, if anybody's just interested in learning more. And they're experts. Like they can walk through the different salary ranges for different types of roles. You know, they're a wealth of information. And then for our process, we don't collect anything until we actually make a placement. So we have some clients that go through the process. They get candidates from us, and they just decide either they don't have a need anymore, or maybe the candidates aren't what they expect. And there's no pressure to hire somebody. If you decide not to hire, that's fine. There's no money out of your pocket, and you've had the opportunity to sort of see what's available. But in most cases, people end up hiring one of the candidates that we present. And then you mentioned our pricing model. We decided to do just a fixed flat rate model. Most recruiters like us charge a percentage of the first year comp, usually about 35, maybe 30% of year one comp. We just decided to do a fixed flat 2,900 because that then doesn't create incentive for us to go and like find the highest cost talent that a client would accept. It's just a more fair model where our interests are aligned with the clients and finding sort of the best possible person at the right level of comp, rather than the highest level of comp that a client could stomach.
And I'm going to break this down for our listeners here. So at $1,500 a month, you are looking at an $18,000 a year investment in a person who has experience running the operations of a business, and somebody who can help you take tasks off your plate that you as a business owner, like in the early days, in my mind, there's like nothing more important than driving the business, meaning like going to get the job, doing sales, asking for referrals, delivering 5-star service. Like if you can have someone on the back end, like I can't tell you guys how much this helped us in the early days, just to have someone who literally, it's like when I get a request in on my phone, I can literally forward it to her. I can ask her to help out with things that need to be handled on the phone or on the computer, especially if you guys are in the similar industry and who are listening, right? It's like if you're operating equipment, that's unsafe, right? So having somebody on the back end is big time help. Just to paint some context, it's like here in the US, if you're going to hire an office manager, like, if you want to bring that person on full time, minimum looking at 50K with the cost of living. And so with the fee, and I think your guys' pricing structure is very fair. Some of these people are going to think I'm getting paid by you as a sales rep for this at this point, but a $2,900 fee, puts you a little just shy of $21,000 a year investment. You're not going to be able to find that here in the US. And so this is why I'm excited to go through and continue the process with hiring short talent with you guys. But I think what you guys are doing is really cool. And the fact that the mission being to help those people get high quality jobs is just awesome. And at the time of publishing this, it sounds like if we publish this next week, it sounds like this will still be available as an offer for the Venezuelan hires, correct?
Yeah, we've got dozens of candidates in Venezuela across a bunch of different roles, and so we'll keep going with this offer until we exhaust our Venezuelan candidate database. But and I mean, I think this will create additional candidate demand, and I think our database of pre-vetted Venezuelan workers will continue to expand. So, I mean, I don't see things changing there anytime soon. So I don't see us ending this offer anytime soon. So yeah, but going back to one thing, what you're just talking about, and sort of the benefits of hiring somebody, and the challenge of you as like an individual operator in managing the work plus all of the admin. I mean, think of it from the customer perspective. Like, as a consumer, I can't tell you how frustrating it is that I have to chase contractors down to like schedule jobs and send me invoices and, and get the work done. In most cases, like the individual operator, like is the guy doing the work. Like he's the guy doing the HVAC and the plumbing work. He's also the guy taking the calls and scheduling the jobs. It gets, and they're not available. Like while they're doing the install work, they're not available to do scheduling, and it's a mess. And from a consumer perspective, it's not a great experience. Whereas like, if that plumber or HVAC guy, hired like one back office admin that answered the phones and handled scheduling and did all that, like it would make their customer service experience so much better, and probably make a much more efficient business operation, making that owner more money.
It would. And I can speak to this from experience. The second we have invested in this, it paid dividends. And the reason, because, and this is not a knock to any other contractors out there, but the bar is set very low in these industries. And the reason being because a lot of contractors just got into the trade because they know how to do the work and they enjoy doing the work, being good at it. But most don't necessarily know how to take it to the next step and actually run a business out of it. And so, like, this is one step that you can literally set yourself so far above the competition, because when a customer calls in or whenever they fill out a form on your website and you have automations in place on the back end to get a call immediately from somebody, hey, this is Austin with Baird Call, or hey, this is Gabrielle Call Services, right?
Yeah.
That initial touch point is so huge, and it sets you so far above most other contractors in the game.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, once again, not to keep beating a dead horse here, I'm excited about this process. Tactically, we've got a few more minutes here before we wrap up, as I know we're approaching the top of the hour. How are you doing on time?
I'm good. I got plenty of time.
Okay. All right. My daughter gets up here and my wife is out of town for work. So I've got a few minutes after the top of the hour, but we'll finish up here. Tactically, can we riff on just some ideas? Like, I'd love to hear your perspective on, like, what are some just first, like, low hanging fruit tasks that really in any business, whether you're in self-storage or contracting, it's like you should just get that off your plate as an owner.
Yep. Just think about the sort of the lowest value tasks that really anybody could do. I think one is answering the phones, right? Like if you got somebody who is there specifically to answer phones, take customer calls, schedule jobs, all of that. I think that's like the lowest hanging fruit is just building a super responsive customer service organization. And I say organization like that could just be one person. And then I think things like invoicing, like sending invoices out to customers, following up with customers for reviews. Like my self-storage properties do really well in Google rankings, in part because we're really proactive in gathering customer reviews. Like I have a bonus structure where I pay my team for every 4 or 5 star Google review that they get. And we've got, you look at any of my properties, even the small ones have dozens of 5-star reviews. And we're like way above any other of our competitors in the area. And consumers look at reviews. Like if you do a Google search for storage in your area, your eyes are going to go to that property that has, a 4.7 star rating with 50 reviews. If the next guy has like 5 reviews and a 3.5 star rating, we're going to gather so many more clicks and calls from that. And then just anything else that's that's administrative, managing vendors. This is kind of going up, stepping up a little bit, but like, my team manages all of our vendors from anything from like, gate repairs to, we've got some like major excavation, a new retaining wall being built at one of our properties. That was completely coordinated by my remote team. They went and found vendors, got bids, presented those bids to me. I made the final decision on which one to go with, and then they manage like they're doing all the project management. And this one project, it's happening now at one of my properties. Like it requires like shutting down one of the lanes at our property and coordinating all that. And they're just like, they're doing all of that to make sure that it runs smoothly. So yeah, I think I would just look at like, if you're an owner operating a business, what are the things that I would just separate your tasks into the low value tasks and the high value tasks. And you mentioned it, like in your situation, the highest value tasks for you are probably getting new customers and then making sure that the jobs are done properly, building your team of people to do those jobs. Lower value tasks are probably answering the phones, sending invoices, tracking down payments, sorting receipts, like all those things that like don't require your specific skill set.
Have you figured out a solution for the receipts as far as like physical receipt for you to be 100% hands off?
Not 100% hands off. Receipts are actually like they're kind of a challenge. We try to, although in our situation, most of our receipts are electronic. Like we're paying our utility bills every month, and we get an email receipt for those. And we're paying contractors, we're getting invoices and receipts for those by email. And we've set it up so that we've set up email rules so that those receipts are automatically emailed to QuickBooks. But there's definitely some manual intervention there. And, in some cases you have to print an email receipt as a PDF in order for it to get into QuickBooks properly. But I would just, there's some, with QuickBooks, you can really easily set up receipt forwarding where any receipts that are forwarded from specific addresses go automatically drop into QuickBooks, and then either you or your bookkeeper can attach those to the appropriate transactions.
Definitely. So one of the challenges, and for anybody listening to this, and Baird, you may have some ideas. Berg was mentioning an idea the other day, but sorry, I think we've referred to Berg a couple times. I don't think he would care because he's been on the podcast. So for those of you who are curious, it's Berg. We do have an episode earlier on serial entrepreneur, really cool guy, and just really savvy entrepreneur as well. But I'm interested, for any of you listeners, if you guys have figured out a way, because like I literally have an Epson like receipt scanner, because we got to take this stuff serious, right? And when my office manager left, that's one of the things I had to take on. And I was like, oh my gosh, I literally spent like an hour and a half just like manually scanning receipts into our drive so it goes to our bookkeeper. And I'm like, I got to figure out a way to automate this or delegate this, because of it's just one of those low leverage tasks that one needs to be. And when we say low leverage, it's like, it's not that it doesn't need to be done. It's just you as the owner, there are more valuable things that you can be working on.
Yeah.
You have any ideas, or have you ever leveraged like any of the like virtual mailbox stuff?
I haven't. Maybe one of your listeners will present a solution, and it'll help both of us. Sounds like in your case you have more paper receipts than I do. In my case, it's pretty easy to handle, virtually through email, because most of our receipts are electronic. But I gotta think that there's some tool that could make that easier for you, where you can just snap a photo of those receipts and put it. QuickBooks even might have a tool in their mobile app where you just snap a photo of each of the receipts and it automatically drops it into QuickBooks. And it's pretty smart. Like their system's pretty smart, where it can read the receipts and attach it to, or suggest an attachment to a certain transaction. But that's where I'd start, is look and see if does QuickBooks mobile app have a solution that could make that easier for you.
Definitely. So as far as other things you have delegated to people on your team, let's talk like a little bit higher level management or operations.
Yeah. Couple of areas. Marketing. My team now fully manages our websites. they're constantly updating, new content on our websites, like blog posts. They manage our Google profiles. So Google really likes it when you actively manage your Google profile and you're consistently posting updates and offers. You're responding to messages, you're responding to reviews. Like the team has taken over all of that, which is pretty beneficial. The other, in our industry in self-storage, we have this auction process, this lien process, where if somebody doesn't pay their bill, we have a lien on the items that they have stored. But in order to, there's very specific state laws that dictate like the process that we go through to to collect payments and auction units if we need to. The team's sort of taken over defining that process with, I've given them the resources where they can understand the local, Colorado and New Mexico storage lien laws. And then they've sort of configured the software and our processes to make sure that we're in compliance with those laws. Vendor management has been really big, like, enabling the team to go out and find contractors for specific jobs, get bids, and then ultimately, like, long-term build a database of preferred contractors, so that, like, if a gate goes haywire in Pagosa Springs, we've got that list of gate vendors in Pagosa Springs in order of priority, where you start with contact number one. If they're not available, you move to contact number two. Really building out that workflow so that, like, if something goes wrong, everybody knows what the steps are to solve that issue. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that team handles. I mean, paying bills, I use Melio. It's melio.com, which is a payment solution that allows us to pay our bills either through sending a paper check or by ACH. And there's some really nice, like, approval workflows in there where any transactions above a certain amount can come to my inbox for my approval. And I'm sure I'm missing a ton there, but I mean, today all I really do is like a little bit of bookkeeping each month, which I could offload as well, but I like to clear my bank feeds because I get to look at every transaction that's happened in the month. I'm a stickler for clean books. So, like, I make sure that every transaction is categorized properly. So I do a little bit of bookkeeping each month, and then I focus on, like, revenue management. So I look at the occupancy of properties and make decisions as to, like, existing customer price increases, changing our street prices, and that kind of thing. Actually, and that's another point, is competitive research. Like, I've got my team making calls every month to competitive facilities to check prices and occupancy, make sure that we have a comparison of where our prices are versus our competitors. So yeah, there's so much that they can do.
How do you manage your SOPs and communication with your remote team?
So we use Dialpad as our phone software. So each of our properties have a phone number that routes into Dialpad, and Dialpad has a mobile app, a desktop app, and then web browser access. And it has like a team chat function, individual and team chat functions, very similar to Slack. So all of my communication with my team is through Dialpad, and then for, like, storing documents, SOPs, like, any sort of, like, knowledge-based stuff, we use Notion and then Google Drive some as well. So we don't, and to be honest, like, I don't even have a ton of insight into all of that. Like, Desiree, my ops manager, she's built all that. It's a little bit of a black box to me, but I know it works and it runs and everybody does what they're supposed to do. So I don't even know, like, I wouldn't even know how to access, our Notion page and all of that. But I guess there's a little bit of risk there for me. Like, if Desiree disappeared, like, she's not going to leave. She's she's paid really, really well, and she's super happy. But you never know what happens in the future. So that's actually probably a highlight for me, is that I should have a contingency plan where if she were to become unavailable, we need to make sure that we know where all that stuff is.
Could you have her? Sorry, my head goes immediately to operations here. Do you have her just document everything that she creates with a Loom video attached and like back it up in the Google Drive?
We do use Loom a lot. I do need to make sure that all that stuff is backed up. And this is a great benefit of this conversation for me, as I do sometimes I think about like worst case scenarios. I need to have a contingency plan in that worst case scenario that she were to become unavailable.
So I just went through this. I told you, our office manager took another role, and she did a fantastic job of documenting everything up to this point. But I was like you, it's like sort of a black box, like part of her role and responsibility was to create that process and document everything. And so the reason why I have not hired for this role yet is because I wanted to spend the time. I basically told our team, like, anything that you would have sent to her, send to me now, because I want to know how it's all working together. And I need to familiarize myself with this process. And then I feel like I will have a really good understanding of how to create that next role and expectations for whenever we come to, hopefully it's Hire Latam,
Yep.
that we get something there. So you use Notion, Melio, Dialpad, Google Drive.
Yep.
Are there any other? How do
We've
you
got.
pay?
Sorry, say that again.
How do you pay your contractors remote?
I pay them. So a few of them have actually US bank accounts, and I pay them using Melio. I can set up recurring payments using Melio. And then one of them we pay via PayPal. And I've actually offloaded that to my ops manager, Desiree. So she now has, we've got a business PayPal account linked to the business checking account for the property management business, and she sends those payments via PayPal. And then I have another person in Venezuela who doesn't have a U.S. bank account, and I pay them using a local app called Zinli, Zinli, and it allows me to load value into my wallet, like US dollar value into my wallet using a credit card, and then I can transfer that value to her, and it goes into her wallet. Venezuela is a little bit more difficult than others, just because of the sanctions. There aren't a lot of payment providers that work in that market, and so Zinli is a little bit of a hack for me, workaround. But in most cases, like Wise is really easy to use. We probably use Wise more than any other money transfer service for paying the Hire Latam team, and and anybody that we handle payments for some Hire Latam clients to their workers. Wise is the most common.
Will Wise work for Venezuela, or you're saying you have to use Zenly?
Wise will not work for Venezuela. I use Zinli. There's other options that work there too. I'm trying to think. I mean, you can use some like cryptocurrency exchanges to send payments to somebody in Venezuela. And I know there are others. I just don't have them on the top of my mind here.
Okay. Well, Baird, this has been so much fun, and I'm glad we finally got to actually talk in person. I know we've engaged back and forth on X for a couple years now, and definitely looking forward to getting skiing this winter and maybe doing a mountain bike ride at some point. But I appreciate you being on.
Absolutely, this was long overdue. We're in different parts of the great state of Colorado, but at some point we'll get together on skis or bike and meet in person. But thanks, Austin. This was cool. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, definitely. Is there anything else you'd like to share with our listeners before we wrap this episode up?
No, you can. I guess you can find me on X, formerly known as Twitter, as my handle is @Sultan of Storage. I I don't post as frequently on LinkedIn, but I need to. And you can find me on LinkedIn as my real name, Baird Kleinsmith. I can assure you, I am the only Baird Kleinsmith on LinkedIn.
I love it. I love it. Well, thanks again for being on, and listener, thanks again for listening and supporting the show. I reviewed the analytics last week. I was telling Baird before we started the show, and a lot of you people are listening, and I can't tell you how much I appreciate that. It's just a fun side project that started in the winter time during our slow season, and it's becoming something people are listening to, and I'm very thankful for you guys. So if you are getting value out of this, please leave us a 5-star review. Just like building a service business, and Baird mentioned it as well, getting 5-star reviews on your Google My Business profile is super important, but in podcasting, 5-star reviews are really helpful too. So if you don't mind, take 30 seconds if you've gotten some value out of this review. Also, if you have anybody who you'd like us to interview on the show, you can leave those in the comments below. And if you're listening on YouTube, we would sure appreciate a like and subscribe. So thanks again for listening to the Owner Operator Podcast. Don't forget, work hard, do your best, never settle for less. We'll see you guys in the next episode. I wanted to introduce you to 2 of my growth partners. Striker Digital specializes in SEO services specifically for local service businesses. Bodie and Andy, the 2 co-founders, have helped me get Bear Claw Land Services to the #1 search result on Google inside my state for my specific search term. If you want to learn more, visit strikerdigital.com. That's STRYKER-digital.com. Secondly, Local Service Marketers specializes in paid ads and unlimited content creation. I've been working with Josh since the beginning of Bear Claw, and all I've had to do is upload my content, photos and video, into a shared iCloud album or Google Drive album, and they handle everything else from there. Think YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, all that is taken off of your plate. It saves you so much time as a local business owner. In doing so, you end up with a very professionally designed social media presence. After the presence is created, then a paid ad strategy can be implemented to help bring you more leads and win you more jobs. If you're interested in learning more, you can visit localservicemarketers.com.